We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories this evening. And Donald Trump has agreed to pause trade tariffs against Mexico and Canada for at least 30 days. But similar measures against China are still due to come into effect tomorrow. Sir Keir Starmer has said the UK is committed to working with both the US and the EU at a meeting of leaders in Brussels. And a teenage boy stabbed to death at a school in Sheffield has been named locally as Harvey Wilgoose. Another 15-year-old has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. It's a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. And it's time to see what's making the headlines with columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. And the Financial Times says markets have rebounded after the Mexican president convinced Donald Trump to pause tariffs with the country. The Times leads with the tariff trade war too, as Sir Keir Starmer says the UK will stay resolute in its commitment to working with both the US and the EU and is not choosing between them. Sir Keir Starmer has ruled out allowing extra migration for under-30s between Britain and Europe whilst meeting with EU leaders in Brussels today. That's in the Eye. The Telegraph says Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner is planning on creating a council on Islamophobia and is lining up a former Conservative minister to lead it. The Daily Express splashes on the story from Sheffield today, where a 15-year-old boy was stabbed to death in school. While the Metro leads on the former British Army soldier Daniel Khalif, who has been jailed for more than 14 years for spying to Iran and escaping from prison. The Guardian claims Keir Starmer could face an internal revolt over the potential approval of the new oil-filled Rosebank. And missing brain, reads the Daily Star, referring to President Trump's decisions on tariffs. Well, let's ask Steve and Salma what they think about that. I mean, a real mixed bag on the front pages tomorrow, as you'd expect. But, Steve, let's start with the FT, because they're looking at how the markets responded and then rebounded to the tariff news.
Yeah, and we were talking about how now for printed newspapers, first edition's going to be quite difficult in the Trump era because things can change so quickly. And it's a reminder that he sees everything as a deal. So he threatened to put these tariffs on and everyone was ready for it and markets responded. But now he's paused it, having negotiated with Mexico and Canada. And it's a pause so he can sort of still slap them on, which will be a trade war which will affect America as much, probably, as Canada and Mexico. Meanwhile, the EU waits nervously to see whether threats there are paused. Britain is sort of hovering, thinking, oh, maybe he's not going to touch us yet because he quite likes bits of us. And it's going to be like this constantly. Now, I think in the end, he is going to do quite a lot of these tariffs. He believes in it. I think he does believe in it, mistakenly, in my view. He said he loves tariffs, but for now, the love is paused.
And he loves bits of us, the golf course bits and the pomp and ceremony. Yeah. He said the UK is out of line, but we may get a reprieve because of our trading with the US is broadly in balance.
Yeah, but there is this thing about Trump, is that he is following a logic. And as we've discussed many times on this programme, he's a maximalist. So he says these really big statements and then always knows that he's going to move off somewhere. It's the art of the deal, or, everything's about deal making as far as he's concerned. So, Mexico, he wanted something out of Mexico. It was all about the border. That's why they got their reprieve. Trudeau's today sort of come back with tariffs slapped back on the US. And you're right, yes, we are going to be carved out in this special scenario because we're not part of this big trading bloc. And frankly, we're a bit of a minnow as far as the US is concerned. So maybe we're not really worth Trump's concern at this present moment in time. But that doesn't mean that, if we don't play ball, maybe on NATO spending or anything else, that we're not going to be back in the crosshairs.
Yeah, I think we're, 6th or 7th biggest trading partner, something like that. We're in a group with sort of Brazil and France and, all around about 2 or 3% of their trade. Canada and Mexico, of course, way ahead with China, the top 3. Let's have a look at tomorrow's Daily Mail and their headline, "What a time to be crawling back to the EU." This is all to do with Keir Starmer back in Brussels. He's calling it a reset. Salma, the Mail is saying Starmer is begging Brussels for closer ties at Palace Banquet.
Well, as you would expect from the Daily Mail, a paper that backed Brexit, they are going to be pretty nervous about anything that suggests that Starmer is going to go to the EU and perhaps open up the deal again. I think that given we have reform hot on the heels of Labour in a lot of constituencies as well, this is something that Starmer really can't afford to ignore. I think that there, as Steve was alluding to earlier, if you are looking for growth, as the government is at this present moment in time, you are looking for bigger trading partners, the whole thing that Rachel Reeves was after when she went to China, for example. But none of this is without political consequences. And you can really hear a potential betrayal narrative coming down the track if there is any undoing of the Brexit deal that Boris Johnson had. Not saying that there weren't issues with it. I mean, I'm sure lots of people will tell you that. But this is not really the time. As the Mail has rightly pointed out, to go further into Europe when you are trying to negotiate with the US, when Trump is so down on Europe and the EU.
Honestly, this is madness. I mean, if Starmer went to have a cup of coffee in a cafe in Paris, you get headlines like this. I mean, he's been there this evening for this reset, fairly vaguely defined, very cautious, very tentative. And it's the absolute minimum that is required if you want growth with this huge single market on our doorstep. But it does show how difficult the sort of cakeism strategy will be over time. Not that silly headline, but more broadly, governments in the early stage can dare to hope they can move closer to Europe, move closer to China, move closer to the United States. Yeah. And it's difficult, even with someone not like Trump in the White House. And at some point, it will be impossible. But there will be quite a lot of domestic pressure, Salma, on him to move closer to Europe, as well as Steve, the Mail screaming betrayal.
That's absolutely fine. We've talked about the politics of the scenario. Yeah. Let's talk about the practicalities of the scenario.
Yeah.
As you say, what does reset actually mean? It's the vaguest term ever. This is an informal meeting. And, all communications chiefs, probably like myself if I'd been in the same situation, will be sort of saying, oh, gosh, it's a really big deal. But actually, it's not that big of a deal. And strategically, we don't actually know where the Prime Minister wants to be in relation to the EU, because he doesn't seem to be making any argument around it either. So what does he actually want? And what are the Europeans currently willing to give us? I mean, this is the entire problem that we had during Brexit.
All of that. First of all, he has to frame an argument around it. That's not his strong point. He can do some of the micro detail, but framing arguments in a big way and a persuasive way is not it. And you're absolutely right, Salma. The EU will have their propositions as well, and it will be a negotiation. It won't be just Britain sort of flashing its Union Jack and saying, right, we've got everything we want. So it will be really difficult, and this will be the background hum throughout, and they're scared of reform, ahead in the polls again today.
Yes. In our poll.
But in your poll. But it doesn't invalidate the attempt that they are doing to get closer to this huge single market. I think you agree.
I agree with that. But if they want to do that, then they need to be purposeful and have some direction about it. But you say it's reform, and they're snapping at Labour's heels at the moment. And so, on the next paper that we're actually looking at in terms of the eye, this is not just about what's going to happen with their political opponents. This is about what's actually happening internally as well. So UK cabinet tensions, because the 2017 and 2019 more so election result was as a consequence of the fact that Labour lost its heartlands, and it's still having a real crisis about its own identity, about what this new electoral coalition means. I mean, it's equivalent to the redrawing of the political map that Boris Johnson had in 2019.
Yeah, which didn't last very long, and this is fragile too. But I mean, this is very interesting, this under-30s thing,
Yes.
because you could frame an argument. It's difficult with our media, but you could frame an argument. This could be good news for Britain, that you would get a lot of dynamic younger people coming here to work, to generate growth, to work in public services, and there would be an equivalent for younger people going. And that would be it. And it would be more controlled than free movement. But you have to make that argument again and again and again. But because of this obsession with getting the figures down, there are internal tensions within the cabinet.
Well, Sam, let's not forget that the figures went rocketing up after Brexit, and it wasn't the free movement that was the case during the EU. So I'm asking you that. Do you think potential Brexiteers could potentially swallow this idea of the movement for under 30s and if it's managed and controlled?
But it's not about the Brexiteers swallowing it. It's about Starmer making a case for this. I mean, I was on the Erasmus scheme. I lived in the Czech Republic. That wasn't an EU scheme. It predated all these sort of movements.
That's the university scheme where students can go and study in Europe.
So if you're smart about it, this is about opportunities for British young people as much as it is about Europeans.
You frame an argument.
But if I can sit here and say that, why are we already having this tension? Because the Prime Minister is incapable of being able to say, actually, I want to go out and start opening the discussion around an EU mobility scheme because I want British students to have the best opportunity to learn, develop, understand our trading partners and come back and have fulfilling careers and upskill themselves.
It's incredible, Steve, isn't it? That 6 months ago, the idea we'd be thinking about the Panama Canal, Greenland and Canada becoming the 51st state. It beggars belief we're talking about it now. And I mention that because it's not just a rock and a hard place, Keir Starmer's in between. It's several rocks and several hard places right now.
I think it's one of the toughest international landscapes an incoming Prime Minister has faced for decades, arguably since 45. And at some point, he's going to have to make choices. Say it's early days, Trump's just arrived, he's relatively new, he can try and work with everything, keep all the balls in the air, but not for long. And my guess is the crunch will come when Trump does something which he has to distance himself from. He's not distanced himself from the tariffs yet, has he?
No.
Because why at this point? But this is very early on in the life of Trump and Starmer.
Yeah, and let's not forget the Chinese tariffs are still in place and they want to go to the World Trade Organization. It ain't going away anytime soon, is it? Thanks both for the time being. We'll come back to this. Coming later on, actually, we'll be looking at this front page on The Guardian. Starmer facing a revolt over the potential approval of a new oil field. Another headache for him.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News.
I want to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
A police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave.
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview here on Sky News. I'm here with columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Let's get straight back to the papers. Let's go to the front page of tomorrow's Guardian, Steve. And, well, look, I think we said Keir Starmer's in between several rocks and several hard places. We'll get another one because he faces a revolt over backing for an oil field in the North Sea.
Leadership is about resolving dilemmas and sometimes really complex dilemmas. I remember once Tony Blair, I went to see him when he was Prime Minister very early on, was about 40 points ahead in the polls. Everything looked easy. And he said, every hour in number 10, you had faced a decision where you either had to cut your throat or slit your wrist, and that was the choice. And here we have another one which goes deep into the sort of divide, really, in terms of this government's ambition. Is it climate change, or growth, growth, growth? And Rachel Reeves wants to give the go-ahead to an oil field, which quite a few Labour MPs, and again Ed Miliband, opposes because it counters the environmental mission. She wants it for growth.
Can you have both?
Exactly. And so which way do you turn on these? Now, it's interesting, in this report, they say that some people, the Labour Growth Group, which support the Heathrow third runway, have not actually expressed support yet for this. But it will be another source of tension, as Heathrow will be an ongoing source of tension for quite a long time, actually. And here's another example of a parallel story with the same set of tensions in place.
Do you know, it's one of those things, isn't it, where we all know that Donald Trump thinks drill, baby, drill, and there he is looming large, well, just above that headline as it happens, talking about power dressing Salma, why style matters in Trump 2.0. The papers, regardless, they're obsessed with what people are wearing, aren't they? I mean, you've got half of his family up there too.
Well, the thing I find really interesting about this is Trump is really about the aesthetic. And he really plays up to the idea.
He himself.
Yeah, absolutely.
He loves really big, baggy suits.
Even that sort of the tan and the makeup that's so obvious, you know, he's curated and created this image of himself that's sort of so copyable, and you know instantly when you're thinking about Trump. And the thing that struck me, especially about the inauguration, which is where a lot of these photos are from, is that there is this kind of Republican Trump 2.0 aesthetic. You know, even the fact that Melania wore a hat, it sort of almost resembles a little bit the British royal family in terms of the kind of propriety in which they're now dressing. Even if you compare, I mean, Trump obviously remains the same, but a lot of the women around him have changed and kind of, I think, become a little bit more buttoned up, actually. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people who are going to be watching this who disagree. I just think, in terms of image, creating image for politicians is a very powerful thing. And I think he's done this very deliberately.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, his signature, very, very long, usually red tie, and his very, very billowing very expensive Italian suits. I think the King dresses far better, I have to say.
Well, of course.
Impeccably tailored suits the King wears, so maybe not quite like for like in terms of royal family.
I read the other day in one of the papers, actually, about how he makes up, you know, to get that tan. It takes ages. There's layers of the stuff.
But this is all about TV. He's made for TV.
It
is politics as show business.
It's not quite the same on TV, I can assure you. It's not layer upon layer. Thankfully.
Steve was in makeup for a long time, getting his tan just right.
Consulting on many
very
different
natural
fronts. But
it's interesting because the Telegraph has touched upon this story that was around over the weekend. That the Princess of Wales, Kate, is now not going to share the details of what she wears. And Lisa Armstrong in the Telegraph says the palace's fashion blackout is wrong.
Well, I mean, I totally understand the Princess of Wales's need to be recognised for the work that she's doing and to shine a light on the charities that she works with and for.
Yeah.
And I can understand her wish to focus on that. And that has been the driver as to why she doesn't want the clothes that she wears to be reported on. But in a similar vein to sort of Trump 2.0, projecting that image and being able to participate in the meaning of it is a very strong part of how you project power. And constitutional power in this sense. So really, I can understand that there must be a lot of pressure on her to look a certain way, and she must have to think about it a lot. So I'm afraid, you know, the feminist in me absolutely wants to support her focus on her work, but the comms sort of advisor in me, as I did for politicians, understands that actually you need to be able to project an image too.
Yeah. The main headline on the Telegraph tomorrow is Reign has set rules on Islam and free speech. That's their big headline tomorrow. I'm sure we'll pick up on that in a bit. First, let's take a quick look at the weather. And it's going to be mild, wet and windy for many tomorrow, but it will turn drier, calmer and colder from Wednesday. There'll be a mostly mild but windy start with prolonged rain over southern Scotland and the southeast of Ireland and showers to the northwest. The rest of Britain looks quite cloudy. Southern and eastern Scotland, northern and western England and Wales will stay windy with prolonged rain taking over during the morning, while southeastern Britain will be dry with some bright or sunny spells. Ireland, Northern Ireland and western Scotland, meanwhile, will have sunny spells and some blustery showers. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, Mexico and Canada receive a reprieve for now. But what next for China, the EU and even the UK when it comes to Trump's tariffs? I'll have more on that in a
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.